All right, first we want to give a shout out, as always, to our member spotlight, R Value Homes. R Value just recently released on their blog 9 tips for passive solar heating. I know right now for many of us, we're not too worried about that, but this is also for staying cool in the summer. And this is definitely one of the simplest, most quickest ways for new construction to get to net zero energy. So check out our member, R Value Home, and their 9 tips for getting to passive solar heat. This is what GreenHome Institute members do. So make sure to become one, and so can you. All right, well, welcome everyone to the report for inventory of zero, a zero energy home report in the US and Canada. Before we get started, we want to say a top thanks to our top tier sponsor, Mitsubishi. I've been running off Mitsubishi now for almost 3 years, fully electric air source heat pump system, cold weather climate. I'm here to tell you I made it through a 3rd winter alive and nice and toasty and warm. So we know these systems work well. They work in cold climates. There are ducted systems. There are ductless systems, which are the most efficient that we know work very well, that you may know them by. And there are ducted mini split systems that can be hidden in certain areas and that sort of get the best of both worlds for projects as well. So you can make many different choices there. One thing I really like is that there's a lot of confusion around the Inflation Reduction Act, especially if you're trying to figure out what kind of tax credits you might be able to receive for heat pumps. And so Mitsubishi really makes this easy for you, whether you're in the north, whether you're in the south. They try to help you out and try to help you figure out which of their indoor and outdoor units pair well together and can be potentially approvable for tax credits if you go to their website. Again, you need to check with your tax advisor. Can't say you're going to get a credit or not, but these are the most efficient systems that they have, and you can check that out on their website. Whereas we find right now on the DOE's website, not quite well put together as of yet. For those of you who are too nervous to go fully all electric, or you've got clients who have good gas systems already, and maybe they're in a place like where I live, where we have cold weather, coal-fired grid, and very expensive utility rates, you can use the IntelliHeat to just connect that outdoor condenser to the indoor gas-fired system, and you kind of get the best of both worlds instead of using an air conditioning system. And make sure to find a Diamond Pro contractor to help you do that. So you can reach out to them on Mitsubishi's website and find a pro there to help you and your project team. We also want to say a big thanks to our 2nd tier sponsor, Panasonic Ventilation. They're going to help you find all the ventilation systems from supply, exhaust, balanced to recovery, and smart ventilation now. Everything you need. Go check them out at Panasonic. So again, here we are for report inventory on zero in the US and Canada. This course is brought to you by the GreenHome Institute. The GreenHome Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. Today, I will be your moderator. My name is Brett Little, and I am the education manager here. This course is approved for multiple continuing education units, including our Certified Green Home Professional designation under Energy, as well as AIA Health, Welfare, and Safety, which may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license, and Passive House Institute US. All right. So I am super excited to welcome back Aaron Smith from EEBA. This, I believe, is formally the 2nd time he's been on the show. He gave an update of the net zero inventory back in 2021. And so we're really excited to have him back out to give the 2023 update. He's also been part of at least maybe 1 or 2 of our net zero energy conferences here in Michigan as well, virtually during the pandemic. So it's always good to have Aaron back. And before I hand it off to Aaron, again, I just wanted to go over what the definition is of net zero and zero energy, if any of you are wondering. And just to keep it simple, and Aaron will dive into it a little bit more, is a home or building that produces as much renewable energy, typically solar power. So wind, not usually too often. Geothermal, not a renewable energy, despite what they say. But typically solar power is what produces the energy, and then the home, consumes just as much over the course of a year. That's typically what we're talking about with net zero. And then all of these different programs we're going to talk about define it in a little bit of a different way. There's also zero carbon, zero ready. There's significant energy efficiency standards. And there's this new idea where where technically we need to be fully net zero 24/7, 365, which is a little bit different and a much more lofty goal, and one way that I think we have to keep talking about on how to get there. So Aaron, with that, I will hand it off to you to talk about where we're at, where we're headed, and how people can join the movement to get there. So welcome, and please take it away.
Yeah, great, Brett. It's always great to be here, and we're always so excited to work with our partners at GreenHome Institute, and we've got the same mission, so it's great to be here. We'll keep this very open. If you have any questions, feel free to share them throughout. But I will go ahead and share my screen. So the inventory of zero in the United States and Canada. This report started in 2015, and we really drew the line at zero energy ready or capable homes and above, and started tracking those across single family and multifamily homes. So I believe this is the 6th year of the total report, and probably the most exciting report that we've had thus far. Despite the US and Canada, I think we have homes and multifamily properties in maybe 15 additional countries around the world. So, I don't know if it's the most comprehensive database of zero energy ready, capable, and above, but it certainly is one of them. The other thing I'll tell you is it's definitely not all inclusive. This is a volunteer system for people to upload their projects, to be able to share them across communities. We've tried to aggregate projects across multiple rating systems. So that's a little overview on that. So I'll give you a executive summary of the report, because they always tell you, Brett, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. I might not tell you what I told you, but so the 2022 report showed a 190% increase in all projects reporting to be zero energy ready or capable or above. So again, I think on zero energy ready, you've got a very efficient house, might have a low HERS score. It's wired and ready for solar, but the solar hasn't been put in or the batteries haven't been put in. That's the zero energy ready program. I think most exciting, since we all live in a home, I guess, is that the latest report showed a 440% growth in single family homes at or above zero energy ready or capable. And I think in previous reports, we saw more multifamily projects, and it's kind of shifted here over the last 2-year reporting period to a lot more single family happening. Single family now makes up 60% of all projects reported in the US and 17% of those reported in Canada. Everything else is a multifamily project. And I think that makes sense when you think, if you've been to Canada, to Vancouver or Toronto, and a lot of multifamily there, and perhaps a little bit more single family here in the United States. We saw major growth of, and Brett, question.
I was just curious if that includes, and maybe you're going to get into it, but just is mixed use considered in this conversation or separated at all?
No, it certainly can be. I think that we're trying to keep the typology of the report to dwelling unit type reports, but certainly a mixed use facility has dwelling units above and could participate in reporting through the inventory.
And is that something you track separately? Like, hey, check a box if you're mixed use, or have something at all?
One of the struggles with the reports, you're going to get a little of the sausage making, is, we try each year to make a couple more questions mandatory, and then but you've got a lot of data you're trying to gather.
Yeah.
but you don't want to make it too onerous to the
Sure.
report. So I know we ask you, is it single family? Is it multifamily? How many units are there?
Right.
I'm not certain that we ask specifically for a mixed use. I'd have to go back to the spreadsheets.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Yeah. Uh, uh, Probably the most exciting thing, most interesting thing for all of us is that we've seen major growth of net zero. So as Brett explained, a net zero home or building creates as much energy as it uses over the course of a year. And Brett and I talk, not just at these things, but I think, Brett, your house is now net zero. My house is net zero. We tend to geek out on this stuff. And then net positive. So, I mean, actually, my house is net positive. Brett, I don't know where you're at on, are you exporting more energy back to the grid?
Well, I do want to be fair. I'm actually targeting a zero carbon, which is a whole nother thing, right? And maybe we'll get into that as we're going.
Yeah.
But no, I don't have enough solar yet to be a formal net zero player. So
Yeah,
but I promise you all, once I get there, I'll let you know. So
that's awesome. Well, and I want to tell people that I shared the link to the inventory. If you have a house that's zero energy ready or net zero or net positive, and you want to report, my house is in the system. So we welcome existing dwellings as well. And I think in many ways, when you have the operator of the house reporting on the data and actual usage versus perhaps the builder or developer reporting that it's going to be great, it's more valuable data over the long time. So quite a bit of growth in net positive, or homes that are actually over the course of a year exporting energy back to the grid. So in 2015, zero energy ready or capable homes made up 85% of the inventory. Today, it makes up 33%. And that's not a bad thing. It's because the majority have shifted over to net zero or net positive. So we see that becoming addressable. We see it becoming easier. We see it becoming more accessible to more people. And then we'll talk a little bit about the most frequently reported technologies deployed. And those include, as many of you expect, but geothermal, photovoltaics, which is solar, battery storage is being reported more and more often. And I think we would expect EV car chargers being reported more and more often. Brett, I know we've got a couple of questions there. Do you want to do any of those now, or?
So there was a question about geothermal, and I guess I wanted to clarify it a little bit. And what I meant by that is, and you can chime in, Aaron, too, is that sometimes when people call geothermal renewable, it's true. It's absolutely true. However, I've yet to hear to this day of a single family home drilling a well down into the mantle and getting power out of it, right? I mean, I actually heard that perhaps there are multifamily buildings doing this in New York. I don't know if anyone saw that, but setting that aside, geothermal is AKA ground source heat pump.
Yeah.
The ground source heat pump in and of itself, cannot produce any power. It relies on some sort of power input. And I think most people know that, but some people, they're like, oh, I'll get a geothermal system and it will produce my power and I'll be net zero. I'm like, well, no. So I just wanted to clarify that one for anybody. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And I think you're right that, I think we in the industry, we talk about geothermal at exactly as a synonym for ground source.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're probably right that now I'm wanting to change my slide and say ground source here instead. But
people know it as geothermal. They know what you're saying.
They do.
Right?
They do.
You say ground source heat pump and people are like, they're gone, what?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's not the correct term, but everybody knows, I'm putting geothermal in my house. So I think the surprising thing for me in this report was the number one reported technology, geothermal or ground source.
Right.
And yeah, it's it can be an incredible system, particularly in the northern parts of the United States and Canada, because you're not as subject to those low temperature things. But yeah, you still want solar potentially to run that system. That'll help you be much more net zero. So that's a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. And thank you for the continuing questions. So this is what I get excited about, Brett. You know, this is the hockey stick growth. I think this is what we're all hoping to bring to the industry. You can see back when we started the report in 2015, I mean, I think we had 10,000 total units reporting. In 2016, maybe 12,000, 2017, 22,000. And you can see today, we've got 67,107 units that have reported. That makes up 39,395 homes or apartment buildings, or 3,096 total projects across it. So overall, there was 190% growth from 2020, which is fantastic. And most of that growth derived from the 440% growth in zero energy single family housing. So not zero energy ready, not net positive, zero energy. So huge growth. And we're starting to see that hockey stick curve. So let's take a look at the geography of zero. And what we've done within the reporting is we've done a breakdown of the top states and provinces. And every one of those improved from the last report. And I would call out that California actually doubled its number of units in 1 year. So I think that it's interesting. You know, we've got California in the first position, and then New York, Colorado, Arizona in the fourth position. I know we have some folks on from Arizona. Florida in the fifth position, Massachusetts, Ontario, Pennsylvania, Oregon, Connecticut, and Michigan does crack the top 20 states. Now, yeah, and again, this is where, you know, we want, you know, Brett and I want more, or at least I do, Brett. I won't speak for you, but I want all the Michigan projects in here. I want all the projects from people that are listening on the phone, because we want these to be counted. And I think, Brett, you know, that when they were doing the Inflation Reduction Act and looking at the benefits of a zero energy ready capable home, they actually used this report on Capitol Hill to say how many people are out there, how many of these houses exist, how many builders are there, how many subcontractors are there, is this something we can really scale? So I encourage people, you know, stand up and be counted. We know there's more than 285 projects in Michigan. Absolutely there is. Is this by a comprehensive database of everything? No, it's a volunteer database. So it's only as good as what we put into it. But Brett, are you surprised by some of the states? I mean, I think we've got some, you know, there's some states that are perennial green building states, but there's some states there that surprised me. What's your thought?
Well, yeah, and actually I'm really surprised to see Minnesota not there, in contrast with Michigan being there. Like, if Michigan wasn't there, then I wouldn't think much of it. But given that Michigan is there and Minnesota is not, that's really surprising to me, just because, you know, I've always seen most of the really good work, besides Chicagoland, of course, coming out of the you know, the Twin Cities area, from at least my perspective in the last 6 years, anecdotally speaking anyway. So it's good to do an inventory like this. Hey, you guys are behind, you got to catch up, right? So
Yes. Yeah, we've been speaking a lot. You know, obviously I'm in Minneapolis, and we've been speaking a lot on this in our home market, that we're just not standing up and being counted, right?
Yeah. And one question I have on California, I mean, effectively, it seems to me that net zero technically is code, right? Technically, yes and no. And so what happens when inevitably it does become code? Is it then, you know what I mean? Like, should it still be reported then as something special? Is that something you've all thought about?
I think it still is special, even
Yeah.
if it's code, because the code, there's a lot of people in a lot of states and provinces here. And I think it's still helpful and it's still important to see where things are going. I guess the only thing I think about as we go forward is, I think I was quoted the other day, I was saying, actually, zero energy ready is maybe too easy. I do see over time that there's a shift that we don't even count as zero energy ready or capable home.
Sure.
And then only count. So we'll raise the bar to net zero, code or not. And then I think there's some interesting things there. Like, we've already added in the report a column for carbon footprint of the home. So operational embodied carbon footprint.
Mhm.
And we're starting to see in some states, some provinces, some cities, a requirement. Like, I think, well, Grand Rapids, Michigan, there's now a requirement for zero energy ready. That's great. Or you're trying to go more all electric. But I think we're trying to raise the bar as we go. And I just see zero energy ready dropping off of it over time.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to see another question that came up here. What about are you tracking features like all electric homes or passive solar while you're grabbing these surveys from people?
We definitely track the fuel type,
Right.
and it's difficult to. I think we can parse the data somewhat, but we're really interested in, how many all electric homes are there? How many have biomass? How many are using mixed fuel? I think that's all important data, and we do ask it. And on some of the data I'll report in this, Brett, you'll see like how many responses we get. So we're trying to frame it and say, here's the data. We maybe only receive that field input from 1,257 people, I think, is on the one slide.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's always free-form cells. I mean, I think if people have passive solar, I mean, we'd want to understand that as well. But again, it gets to be a huge spreadsheet, and I've lived in it for a couple of years now, and I think you get better and better at it as you go.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
There is also a mapping tool, and I think that's kind of fun to start to look at what's in my neighborhood, what's in my community, what are other people doing, how many kilowatts of solar are they using. So we want to try to share. I mean, that's the real thing. It's like you want to get all of our communities very excited about what's possible, what's going on in their local community.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm wondering, and again, I don't want to take away from anything else you're going to show up, but I think of the appraisals, right? Like we keep coming back to the same issue over and over and over again, right? And what is the number one reason that appraisers don't value homes like this properly? Is because they say there's no comps. Right. So is it a list like this, you could defer them to. Now, of course, I understand the second barrier then being if that home hasn't had a transaction, it doesn't count. It doesn't exist, right? You could be one home surrounded by 50 net zero homes. If any of them never sold, they don't exist, right? Which is a little frustrating, but I'm just curious if this is something that's been looked at as like a way for a real estate transaction for comps at all. So
yeah, so we just did an education session on how do you ensure that you have a green appraiser on your team as a builder homeowner, because you don't want, now we're in an environment where they call it busting out, right? Like a project can bust out because it doesn't get the proper appraisal. And there's a requirement with the Appraisal Institute that you need a certified and competent appraiser. And we've encouraged a lot of our builders to actually put that language into their contract. so that whether, if you're working with your own bank, it's easier. But if you're working with a homeowner's bank, they need a certified and competent green appraiser on site, or they will not appraise it correctly. But I think, I believe Nancy's on. Nancy, I don't know if you can share a link to that course by Teresa Lopez, and Brett, you may be interested in having Teresa on too, in a separate. You can sure view our recordings at no charge, but she gives some really great case studies on, net zero houses that were going to bust out, but they got the right appraiser and the right bank on it and got full value, and that there is 1 to 11% better value for these homes. They're, not having an energy bill, it is a significant value, but how do you convey that? And then I think, Brett, you ask a bigger question, which is, I just spoke to the Minneapolis Association of Realtors, their sustainability group, and I said, number one thing you could do is get this in the MLS.
Right.
But MLS is this messy thing. There's 400 different ones across North America. And,
right. Wild West of.
Yeah. I've talked to Trulia and Zillow about doing it. Could they put it in and kind of scale it? But still difficult. I think the only ones that really have it that I know about is Oregon. Has it baked into their MLS. So, Brett, if we can, let's go on to top cities, because this is always a sense of pride. But
yeah,
we've got Santa Clarita, California, Pueblo, Colorado, Waterset, Florida, Prescott Valley. That's in northern Arizona, which is a lot of great work going on in northern Arizona. New York, London, Ontario, Bronx, New York, Boston, Mass, Brooklyn. Let's see, Seattle, Cambridge, Far Rockaway, Honolulu, Clarkdale, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And if you're a Penguins fans, they got bounced from the playoffs last night. Sorry about that. But again, I think there's some here where you could look at the data and say, well, I'm almost certain that Austin should be higher. But we're just not getting the reporting into the tool. They either don't know about it, they're not loading projects in. So again, it's a voluntary upload report. But those are the top cities. Any questions on top cities? And I think I'm going to break this down. And Brett, question? No?
I was just going to say, I think I don't see any location development, but if you want to just go through all the location items, we'll see if anyone's got any other questions about that. So there were some comments here about people, from their own states being surprised that their states weren't in the top 20. And so it's like, my thought is, hey, get out there, get more homes listed and get them put up here if you and get on the list. So that's right.
Absolutely. And again, that's why I continue to say that caveat is, if you're not reported, you're not counted. We want you to report. It can be projects that you did 5 years ago. It can be your own house. Put it in and get counted, because I think, Brett knows we've worked a long time with Department of Energy and EPA, and we hope this can be a really comprehensive database for everyone to get a chance to use and look at. But we know are we hitting everything? No, I don't have a satellite that flies over and says, oh yeah, that house is zero energy, right? I do want to call out, in California's data. So this is skewing, but it's also extremely exciting. This is the top development that we're aware of in North America. It's in Santa Clarita, California. It's a developer called 5 Point. They're advertising it as the largest net zero greenhouse gas emission community in the United States. And I think what they're saying in that language is it's zero operational carbon produced on the site. There's 21,000 homes there. There's 11.5 million square feet of commercial, 100,000 acres of green space. They do address, they're trying to address the housing crisis while focusing on social equity and environmental justice as well. So that's the top development that we found that obviously really pumped up California's numbers and made Santa Clarita, California, the #1 community that was reported.
And, the question kind of comment that came in here, and again, it goes back to what I said earlier. I mean, we are curious if this particular town just has a stretch code over and above California's code that sort of set the stage for this kind of thing or not.
Not that we're aware of,
Yeah.
but I do think there's an interesting piece of this where depending on the size of the developer, some of the funding, some of the investors, some of the pension funds that are investing with them,
Right.
really starting to push environmental, social governance requirements in their portfolios.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's been a big push for driving some things around the country, particularly or more so in, it's almost the opposite, right? Like, why is Florida really good? Why is Texas really good? Well, they've got big national builders and developers, and they're being asked to do net zero.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. They're coming from other areas.
Yeah.
And I'd imagine a town like this is also in a sort of sweet spot from a weather standpoint where your loads, you don't need as much solar, right? You're more passively ventilated, passively cooled. I mean, that, right. At least for now. I mean, it's probably going to get much hotter, sadly, but
Yeah. The only thing I lived in California,
yeah.
and by the coast, so I didn't have an air conditioner in my house, and I literally turned my heating on 2 nights a year.
Right.
So yeah, if you're close enough to the coast, it's pretty easy to be net zero. But my understanding is that Santa Clarita is inland,
Oh,
kind of see from the dot. And I mean, when you get off the coast 5 or 10 miles, it's pretty hot. So I
okay.
think they're pretty subject to some cooling demand loads
Okay.
that don't make it as simple.
Sure. Fair enough.
Right. So that's a huge development that's going on. You can learn more about that online. This is just breaking down the growth in multifamily housing versus single family housing net zero. So in the United States, single family makes up 60%, multifamily 40%. In Canada, multifamily is 83%, single family is 17%. These are the total unit counts that we have by multifamily, single family. And again, 440% increase in single family going to zero. So these single family units, particularly in the United States, have grown pretty considerably. Maybe I don't know if I saw anybody from Canada, so maybe I'll skip the breakdown in Canada. I thought I'd hit that one. So we also track who's the architect. We'd like to see that data. And what we know from the report is that Kaplan Thompson Architects has 80 projects reported, which is a total of 104 units. Zero Energy Plans, Zero Energy Designs, Ewers Architecture, Mark and Design and Consulting, Passive House BB, many great architectural firms listed here. Handle, if we sorted this by unit, Handle Architects actually has 2 huge multifamily projects of about 500 units each. So they actually have the most total units within the report. Brett?
Do you attempt to track this per capita of projects? So by meaning, you could look at this and say, oh, it looks like the plan has a lot, but what if they had, 5,000 projects that year? And then, you know what I'm saying? Like, do you try to gauge like what percentage of their volume is net zero?
Yeah, I think you'd have to understand their total volume.
Right.
So we haven't, but I think it's an interesting question, right?
Yeah, it's just curious, like.
You would wonder if Zero Energy Design, that's probably 100%.
If it's not zero, I'm wondering what it is then.
Yeah, what is it? So it's probably 100% of their projects.
Right.
But there are some big architectural firms that obviously work across multiple building typologies.
True. That changes things too. So just curious if you had gotten a sense for that or not. So
yeah, no sense. Thank you. Okay, top builders, developers. This is always exciting as well. But 5 Point, obviously, we saw that project in Santa Clarita, California. We had a company called Jevon Investments, Planet Green Energy, Mandalay Homes, Sifton Properties, Corporation for Better Housing. I think that's a Honolulu. Oh no, sorry. Here's Hawaii Community Development Authority. Corporation for Better Housing is a public housing. Onion Flats, Carmel Partners up by UC Davis. They've been doing great work. We have Thrive Home Builders out of Colorado, Danco Communities, Thrive Collaborative, which is out of Michigan, 429 total projects. That number tells me that something's wrong in our data because Michigan should be higher at 429, right? Hawaii, which has huge programs to go net zero. Community Housing Works, Cascade Built, Doug Terry Homes out of Western Ontario, actually pretty close over by Detroit in, I think, St. John. So some of the different builders that we have and developers in the system. I love this slide because this talks about that growth that we talked about in the executive summary. But when we first started the report, 85% of the homes were zero energy ready or capable. They were extremely high performance, energy efficient homes that lacked solar or batteries or some way to get to creating as much energy as they use over the course of a year. 9% of homes were zero energy, 6% of homes were net positive. If we go to the 2022 report, we have 33% of zero energy ready, 51% have hit zero energy or are planned to hit zero energy, and 16% are net positive. And I don't know, as you look forward, technically the Inflation Reduction Act will give you $5,000 a house as a builder for building to the zero energy ready program. We should see this number grow pretty considerably, but it's interesting that more and more people are able to go to zero energy or net positive.
Well, and part of the IRA too has boosted the solar rebate
back to 30%.
So, that helps. You could use the two together, right, to get to net zero, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's some great things there,
And geothermal, don't leave out geothermal.
Ground source.
Yeah, ground source heat pump.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of cash there to get these projects up, right?
The thing I always talk about is whether you're building multifamily or a single family home, there's that HERA portion of the Inflation Reduction Act that you don't always think that, I'm building for a low income homeowner, but you may be building for retirees that have a low income and may qualify for HERA under the 60% AMI. I think they can get up to $14,000 toward the home, toward upgrading the wiring system, upgrading the panel. They can take the solar credit as well. So if they might have capital, but they don't have income, keep an eye on that HERA requirement. I think that, and that guarantee of 30% for the next 10 years on solar, it's a pretty powerful thing.
And I thought there was for, higher above middle income funding available up to like 4,000.
Yeah. So
like 35% reduction in energy, whatever that is, but
yeah. So, the truth is that the homeowners can capture somewhere between $4,000 and $14,000 for their own home, being smart about those incentives. And I love, I think Mitsubishi is making it smart.
Right.
And I think you'll see more and more manufacturers that make it really easy to understand. There's still some Department of Treasury and Department of Labor things going on out there, but it's starting to settle out over time. But I think this shift is showing me that zero energy ready is getting a heck of a lot easier. I think in the future, we'll draw the line at zero energy or above and start looking potentially more at operational carbon and embodied carbon type of issues in the report. So I think this one's really interesting, and and again, I give a call out to all of you that have done a GreenHome Institute Zero Energy certified home. We did go in. We love our partnership with all of you, and we went in and we added that reporting system into the dropdown. So this is all of the zero energy rating systems reported. So the number one, and by the way, if you go back and you look at, there's 72,000, 1,720 of the submissions reported a rating system. So we're not capturing all the data. Within that, 953 were passive house, 322 were DOE zero energy ready. And again, we know there's many more of these. Zero energy ready, there's tens of thousands and only 322 reported. This is the Canadian Home Builders Association net zero reporting. We've got 294 of those. This is Earth Advantage, which is used up in the Pacific Northwest. And this is the International Living Future Institute report. So these are the top rating systems. But I think, Brad, if we had all of the GreenHome Institute Zero Energy certified in there, you'd be a pretty significant number, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It would definitely, certainly can't beat passive house and DOE, but
Yeah.
yeah, we would get the number up there. And that leads me to a question. It's not my question. There were two questions that came in, and then I had a thought, and so I kind of want to merge this all together. But some people were saying, of course, part of it might just be some of the reporting is missing because people just don't want to fill out another survey because they've already spent all this time doing all the paperwork for one of these programs, right? There's, I don't want to say a lot of paperwork. It's good paperwork. You need to get it done. And, most of us were inundated with surveys and forms. I know every day there's a new one that we all have to fill out these days. And so someone made that comment, and then the question someone else had, and I'm going to expand it, was, is there just a sort of automatic reporting opportunity that you might have thought about or had that could happen here with passive house, with DOE? I'd love to set one up where it's just like, boom, it just comes kind of right over. And then if someone wants to give more information, because I know you want to get that, great. But has that something you thought about at all, or is that something you have in place with any of these programs?
Yes. Most of the success we've had from the Passive House program, and that's CEUS or Passive House Canada, is from them just direct reporting. Mm-hmm. And we think that type of reporting is the highest fidelity reporting we can get anyway, because it is a third-party certified program.
Right.
We've talked to DOE about just batch reporting all of the zero energy ready or capable homes that go into the system. On CHBA, I think this was quite a few of their net zero reports. So yeah, I think that's the best way to do it going forward. We definitely could take it that way. Mm-hmm. From a existing rating system, I think it's the highest fidelity way that we can take it. But I think, at the end of the day, like at EEBA, we're, I don't want to say rating system agnostic or that we love all rating systems equally. It's whichever is best for the builder in their local market or for their homeowner. Right. So we really wanted a database where we could report on all of them. You don't have to go over here and look at the DOE net zero tour, and you don't have to go over here and look at passive. Let's put them all on one screen and let's see how everybody's doing together.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, just to be able to go and see zero energy in totality. Yeah, well, great. It's good to hear. And you had mentioned Passive House Canada. Is that something different than Passive House Institute the international version, or is it just sort of the international version in Canada?
Well,
or is that a long story that I don't know about?
No, all I could say, I think, there's obviously Passive House Germany, and that's the big thing. And then there's a group for the US, and I look at it, I don't think it's any different than US GBC and Canadian GBC. It's just that There's CEUS here in the United States, and there's Passive House Canada, and that's as much as I know about it. So
Oh, okay.
there are distinct groups for
Yeah.
each side.
I just didn't know if there was a third emergent entity out of Canada, and so that's something new I may have.
No, I think they're all.
It's part of one of the bigger programs. So.
That's my understanding. Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Oh, you bet. Okay, so that's the rating systems. We talked about this, but this would be the most reported high performance technologies. And again, the grand total of people reporting, and I can't pinpoint why people don't always report. We've even gone back and done some surveying. Oh, can you add to your data? Perhaps now the house is operating. We'd like to see what your actuals were. But we had 2,249 reports of what technology they're using. The number one, ground source geothermal. Number two, EV car chargers. Number three, battery storage. I was surprised, I mean, I think that we're getting some underreporting on PV here because obviously PV is ubiquitous. People just aren't reporting it. But I actually thought, wow, that's a lot of deployment of batteries in the grand scheme of things. I thought batteries would be a little bit lower. I think car chargers, that's not that difficult to put in. Heat pump dryer. Boy, if you haven't looked at it, I mean, I'm doing an ad for heat pump dryers every chance I get. It is just, I just put in a GE heat pump Energy Star condensing dryer. It's phenomenal. I was able to close up that stupid vent coming out of my sill plate in my house that was a giant air leakage and energy leakage, and I had to vacuum that dang thing out every. I think that heat pump dryer is so easy to adopt for a homeowner or a builder or a developer. It's really, really easy. And then heat pump water heater. I think people are. I just put a heat pump water heater in. Brad, have you played around with one yet?
That was my first upgrade back in 2018, and yeah, I love that thing. So
yeah, it's incredible. This I mean, again, it uses solar to pull the BTUs out of my basement and put them into the water. But I mean, these heat pump systems are getting to be 350 to 500% more efficient. So, and then we do have some solar water heating there. And I would say in the old days, or in previous reports, we really only asked oh, are you doing PVs or are you doing solar water heating? And we needed to change the questions to more of the technologies that we knew or assumed were going in. And then we'd always like to understand what type, I mean, we'll ask more data, Brad, what type of heat pump water heater did you put in? What type of heat pump dryer? We don't get many people that fill it out. Again, it's a lot of data, right?
And I was curious about, because it sounds like these are already inputs that someone checks as opposed to they tell you. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, I'm surprised not to see air source heat pumps. Is that perhaps not one of the inputs, or are they really not checking it?
No, it's definitely one of the inputs. And
wow. Interesting.
I know, I would say 90% of the EEBA builders, I mean, they're using air source heat pumps. And I just think we're not capturing it, to be fair, because we even wanted to see, well, what type are they using?
Yeah.
It's just not coming up in the data. That doesn't mean I know it's not correct.
Right. Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. And on I kicked myself. I got a condensing dryer, all electric, to get rid of the vent, but didn't go heat pumping. Oh, the load on that thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have just shelled out the extra $1,000. I'm very sad about that. So
I think they've come down a lot because
and there's the rebates coming out and everything. So maybe mine will die and I can get a good excuse to get a heat pump. Yeah.
Well, it's like you talk about, plan for obsolescence of your equipment in your home if you have a current home. and
Yeah.
just know what you want to do if it goes, and then it's not a crisis situation and you're putting in a legacy product that you're then stuck with for another 10 or 12 years.
Yeah. And when does the air conditioning die, during the heat wave? And
Always.
that's when the heater dies during the cold wave. So
That's right. But if you got a really great envelope, you got some resiliency to your house too, and you can wait for your new heat pump air source system to come. So I just want to, we've got all these units in all stages. It's 67,000 units. But if you look at that data on completed, there's 2,237 projects completed, or 15,360 units. And then we have 349 under construction, 14,613 units. So there was a 44% increase in completed zero energy projects and an 83% increase in projects under construction. But we do allow people to put in projects under development and then move that to, okay, they're under development, they're in design, they're under construction, they're completed projects as you go through. And we'll generally send that out once a year and say, okay, where's this project at? How many units are completed? But that gives you a good feel for the data of how many total projects are completed. And then just acknowledgements. And I know, Brett, we want to add your GreenHome logo here because we sure appreciate it. But we actually, I think we've got that logo now. We'll be able to add it. But let's see. So, learn more and join us. We love partnering with GreenHome Institute. EEBA's got a lot of great education on our platform, but I think that you're able to report your project or refer other projects and builders or homeowners or developers to the inventory under the add your listing. I did put that in the chat. You may have to scroll back up to the top of the chat. But again, thanks to GreenHome Institute and CEUS and ILFI and Net Zero Home and Passive House Canada and the Zero Energy Ready Home Program. SIPA, we actually worked with the Structural Insulated Panel Association, and they knew in their database which were net zero ready, capable, or above, and then our partners at Earth Advantage. So, and any final questions, Brett? Otherwise, I think we've got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, there are a couple more questions. Do you have a hard stop in 5 minutes? Just or can you stick around for a little bit too if there's more questions?
Let me see. I am good.
All right, cool. Well, before we get to those questions, just real quick here, I want to make sure everyone knows that this session, as a reminder, is being recorded, and you can re-watch the session on our YouTube channel at any time. It should be available in the next couple of days. You can share it, pass it around to friends, post it on social media. We'd love to have you get the word out. And then again, for those of you watching this on demand, so not right now, but in the future, watch the whole session, take that quiz with an 80% passing rate, and then you will receive your certificate. Those of you here today, there's no quiz for you. You just need to check your spam at search@gutenbergsearch.com. And as long as you've been here for the entire CEU session, you will receive that certificate. And before we get into all the remaining questions here, I just need to give a shout out and a huge thanks to our board of directors, all of our volunteers, our nearly 300 members, our executive director, Jose Reyna, and our top tier sponsors here who are going to help you and all of your clients achieve net zero and get onto that list. Mitsubishi, Rheem, Aprilaire, and all of our other sponsors who've got products to help you build more sustainable. Make sure to check them out. So Aaron, I wanted to go back to the sort of, well, let's talk about the HERS rating, because I actually was kind of expecting to see maybe a list of HERS ratings. Is that something that you all ask a question about or track or try to get a sense, where the HERS rating is falling on these?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an open field. And
I think you might have disappeared, Aaron. I don't know where you went.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Disappeared. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely track. We want to know climate zone of the project because that's so important. We want to know address so we can map it so it's useful on an interactive map. And we want to know the HERS rating or the ERI rating for the project.
True.
I
301 standard is the new term, right? It's the 301, whatever you got
right,
on that. Yep.
right. Yeah, I think we're all trying to correct our language on that, but
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is that HERS is pretty dominant. And
Yeah.
I think some people would argue that a HERS rating of 45 or less is probably zero energy ready capable. And that HERS zero is not zero.
Well,
The
so that, gets into, some questions that came, and so the question being, for your tool, how do you define zero energy ready? Because I know GreenHome Institute, we've got a badge and a label you can get, which is the GHI Zero Energy Ready. And one of the biggest difference with our program and the DOE's, and again, we love what the DOE is doing. And of course, there's 45L tax credits you can get. We can't claim that, right?
yeah,
But the difference with that is that the DOE wants you to do all these other things. They want you to do the Indoor Air Plus program, the Energy Star program, the water management checklist. And again, that's all great. Like, we want you to get green certification and do all those things. But if you're just like, I just want zero energy ready, it's a lot of other things you got to do. And so we've got this badge now where you can obtain it just by having a low energy use, having the solar ready, and getting solar bids and all that. So the question is, when you said it, Aaron, hey, if you have a HERS index of sort of around 45 or lower, you're kind of close. How are you all defining and tracking zero ready within your program? Is it just the DOE's program, or can somebody have something else that sort of defines that?
no, I think that's why we worked with you, Brett, to,
Yeah.
I mean, we're always saying, there's a lot of green rating system out there, but I think once again, we're open. We're not auditing every project within this. It is self-reported and the data is as such. So I think if somebody says they're zero energy ready, again, the fidelity that'll come with it is the more we could draw from Lead for Homes or from Passive House or FIAS programs or GreenHome Institute's zero energy. I mean, if you have an existing rating system, it's third-party certified, that's great. Of course, with the ERI, you've got an auditor out on site. You can get to, if you have a zero score, you'd be net zero. That's pretty valuable in the report too. So I'm not sure I answered your question with that.
No, no, I mean, you did. I mean, and you kind of got into the next question, which of course, somebody brought up a point like, hey, if, ResNet or BSI or whoever in the future in California, they're collecting these ERIs of zero, again, could that just be then, first of all, automated to report out a home that by definition in your program is net zero? But then also, I think someone had brought up a question and then they vanished. And I don't know if he wants to elaborate if he's on, but they were saying something about the home size adjusters. So apparently this zero that you get, right, can be affected by the square footage and all that. And one thing we've also learned in practice is that just because a home has a zero on it doesn't mean it's actually ends up being zero. And just because a home isn't zero doesn't mean it can't get there, because there's a lot of wiggle room for lifestyle choices once you get into that sort of HERS 10 or so, HERS 15, you can make better lifestyle choices. And so I guess with that being said, is there a way for someone to then report zero, of course, being at 15, but then showing, oh, it's been a year and I actually made it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up some interesting questions, right, around the entire industry, which is, and I don't want to go into too much politics on it, but Yeah, there's a lot of great rating systems. Sometimes I think about, yeah, you can design and you can build the perfect home,
Mhm.
but it's all in the operational phase. And we can do it to the perfect program, and it can be zero energy ready, it can be net zero, but it all depends. It could be the healthiest home. All
Mhm.
depends on the operation, the occupant. So I think it gets more important to look at it going forward and saying, I mean, sometimes I think that, is it electrified? Is it operationally decarbonized? And is it potentially net zero? I mean, I think those are 0 and 1 questions after a year of occupancy or 2 or 3. And I think there are some new rating systems. I think ILFI and LEED have some new net zero specific ratings and have some carbon ratings.
Mhm.
So those will be interesting. And I think we'll continue to grow. But the reality is that, I mean, I almost rather hear from your house. Right? Not that you don't want to hear from all houses, but if we can get from the architect and builder to, I'm the homeowner of this house, so you can go in now, you can claim the house. Like, hey, I now live there. I bought it from Thrive.
Mhm.
And then you're reporting over the years and you're sharing that data. And it's almost like remember the old Tesla owners club, where like, oh my gosh, I did this and I did that. I'm trying this and we did this to get our energy use down. It becomes this community of zero that can share best practices at the speed of thought. So
Yeah, yeah, those are great points. And I do know, like, on the going back to what you said about carbon, I believe ResNet is releasing a carbon sort of, they've always given you carbon data. It's never not been there, but you have to sort of peel the onion back a little bit, right, to find it. But now I think they're giving out like a carbon score, right? So is that going to be like maybe another highlighted, not within your report, zero ready, zero energy, zero carbon? You even mentioned embodied, right? And I heard about a project maybe in Canada to actually achieve zero embodied carbon. So
yeah, I mean, we have builders now that, depending where they are in North America, I don't want to say operational carbon's easy, but you can electrify and renewable your way out of operational carbon.
right,
So in some ways it is easy.
right.
Embodied carbon, it's coming. Depending where you live, it's coming. I mean,
Mhm.
I have a builder at EEBA today that is having to do their embodied carbon footprint for their building permit.
Mm. Wow.
And actually, Brett, I got to talk to you about this, but we've got a new course on net zero carbon building professional.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to offer this across the country, in regional trainings. But it's like, what's a life cycle assessment? What's an environmental product declaration? So again, in the inventory, we've started a column for,
Mhm.
did you offset your operational carbon? Did you calculate your embodied carbon? If
Mhm.
so, what was the calculation? Because I think it can become a really good benchmarking tool.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that look forward to learning more about that class and getting the word out about that too, because that's the way we got to go. And you had mentioned pulling a permit, and this is a good question that someone brought up, and they were curious um, if you either do or would consider tracking the also in tandem the municipalities, perhaps not the state of Michigan, certainly not allowed here, but the municipalities that can do stretch codes, or the states that have zero energy ready or net zero, or apparently somewhere embodied carbon codes at all.
Yeah, I think that I tend to track it with kind of the codes.
Right.
I think I have a map of net zero codes across North America.
Does that show up in that report at all, or in inventory,
It
or no?
it doesn't.
Yeah.
I just always track it because I think it's fascinating to see where people are at and where they're going.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that we talked a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act,
Hmm.
and why do Energy Star? I mean, if you're a US builder today, it's because you get $2,500.
Right.
That's the easiest $2,500 you're ever going to earn as a builder. And I mean, honestly, Brett, if you're not building an Energy Star home today, like in a way, you're wrong. And then, I mean, why do you want to do Zero Energy Ready? Because
Right.
you're getting $5,000, and that's not the only reason. We all have our reasons for going on this journey together, but I think that's really helpful. So there's these great carrots there now. It's not just all sticks,
Right.
right?
Right.
But the one thing I was going to add to that, Brett, is there's a lot of money in Inflation Reduction Act to push the 2021 IECC.
Right.
I mean, in many ways, the 2021 IECC will become the law of the land. Now, there will be states that say we're not doing it.
Right.
But there's a bunch of money behind it that will help the states bring their energy code up. So again, we'll level set. It's kind of 2007 with the ARPA.
Yeah.
We brought everybody up in code, and now this time again, we'll bring everybody up in the energy code.
Right. And yeah, Michigan, we're excited. Michigan hopefully will be passing 2021 as is, I hope. Where COVID, of course, slowed the whole process down, as it slowed everything down, unfortunately. In many ways sped other things up. But so there was a question, and I don't know if this question is specific to multifamily or single family, but the question is about financial institutions or investors. Do you know any specifically that are financing zero energy developments? And to me, that kind of gets into something specific we've been trying to work on, which is called the zero energy home mortgage concept, where it should be very easy for a lender to go, hey, I see you have effectively no utility bill, you have improved value, right? And so we can bump the lending up a little bit more so you have the money you need, which right now, building a new home, nobody can afford. But those who can, it's just a little bit more to get to net zero, right? So have you seen anything like that out there?
Yeah, so I would say it depends, right? I think that if you're doing a big enough project and you're taking money from a big investment firm or a pension fund, or more on the multifamily side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the build to rent, I mean, it's kind of an interesting space too, because that's usually big investors. They have environmental, social governance requirements, and they're saying you have to build this. It's now going to be build to rent net zero. I mean, that's kind of one of the hot phrases now.
Okay.
And the shift in capital, they're long-term hold, right? This isn't flip. It's not, let's put up the cheapest thing we can. They're going to operate that as net zero, and the money, the savings on utilities accrues to them. So I think you're seeing it at the higher level. I've seen some things, or I don't know if you have PACE, do you have property assessed clean energy in
commercial?
Michigan?
Yeah. Multifamily. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can do it for multifamily. It's a really useful tool for multifamily projects. I don't know if I've seen, there are some loans maybe with the VA or FHA, but again, I don't know if Nancy posted that video from Teresa Lopez.
Okay.
I'm not a complete expert in that, but she knows about some programs or about some green appraisers or about some language that you should put in to hopefully get more valuation for a net zero home. And I'll let her be the expert on it, but she's a great resource. She gives her phone number and email address on there, and she's helped a lot of our EEBA builders get it right, or get connected with the right bank or with the right appraisal company. Yeah.
And you make a good point on that, because there is a national green bank movement underway, and we've just been spoiled in Michigan because Michigan Saves has been here, and they have been one of the few leaders in the industry, and so they're helping form this national movement. I think the IRA is just pumping dollars into it. And so the idea, just to put it into context of this conversation, we had one of our members build a new green home a decade ago, and they couldn't get the funding for the solar or the geothermal, aka ground source heat pump. So what did they do? They went to the Green Bank, Michigan Saves, but go to your Green Bank wherever you are. And then there's Clean Energy Credit Union, who we partner with, that any of you can access through our membership. And just said, hey, give me the extra money for the solar and the geo, my lender. They won't help me. They don't care. And so it was like, poof, they got the rest of that money. Of course, nobody wants 2 loans, so that's less than ideal, but it is one way. PACES the other way, I think, can be added with a traditional lending. So yeah, so it's coming. And you had mentioned, well, and there was just a clarification on the geothermal. They were saying, does that mean, does the chart having geothermal be the highest, meaning that it was the highest performance? I believe you were just saying that was the number one reported thing, right?
It's the highest reported.
Yeah. But to be clear, out of all heating systems on the planet, I do believe, technically speaking, it does have the highest COP value. So it's not wrong to say that, right? I don't think you can beat it, can you? Not that I know of, but
I think it depends, right? Because it's it's a thermodynamic question, but
yeah,
one would think in the northern part of the United States, it's probably pretty highly efficient, but you also have that trade-off with the increase in cost. And
sure, yeah. And I just meant, just technically speaking, COP versus COP,
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty nice because that ground temp, down there is pretty much always 42 to 50 or 48 to 52 degrees, somewhere in there, and across Michigan and Minnesota. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. Aaron, well, I think we're a bit over time, but I do appreciate you sticking around with us, and I'll send any of the other remaining questions to you. But again, just as a reminder, if people do have more questions or want to reach out or learn more about the inventory, or hopefully report on the inventory, where can they do that?
Yeah, so I put the link in the chat, but it's EEBA.org, and then you'll see net zero and the inventory. You'll find it up in the guide bar, and you can download the report. So we've got a full PDF, electronic PDF reports if you want to parse through it. Put it on your coffee table. We're always happy. But again, love for you to participate. The more data in here, the better it is for everyone, and really for driving transformation in the marketplace.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, I really appreciate your time and all the work that EEBA, or Energy and Environmental Building Alliance, is doing. I hope you all will go check them out, check out all their classes that they got to help you achieve these goals, and then report them, and let's help others build better as well. So Aaron, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brett.
Take care all. Bye.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.